Hello, friends. I would like to pass on my greetings to all my friends in the software engineering fraternity. This video, which I am actually making, is about how do you go about preparing for interviews for engineering leadership positions. Before I start the video, let me give a context on why I decided to make this video. I used to work as a senior engineering manager in Adobe Systems. And then at a point, I decided, okay, I have to look out for a change. And it had been a long time that I had not undergone any interviews. So I had to prepare towards these engineering leadership interviews. And it was around 2 to 2.5 month journey for me. And I thought, why not share that journey with all my friends who probably may be looking out for opportunities. And probably this video may give some guidelines or some tips towards that preparation. So after preparing for these interviews, I ultimately joined Google. And it was actually a pretty good journey for me as far as the interviews are concerned. And let me try to share with you what are the various kinds of preparation which I did towards these interviews. And that's what I'm trying to cover in this video. So if you look at generally for engineering leadership kind of roles, now let me tell you, when I'm talking about engineering leadership, I'm talking about engineering manager, senior engineering manager, director of engineering kind of roles. I'm not talking about business heads like vice presidents or senior vice presidents, because the dimensions of interviews, the various dimensions covered in those interviews are very different from engineering leadership kind of interviews. And what I'm trying to focus on is completely towards engineering leadership roles. So if you look at the engineering leadership roles, the kind of interviews which you will have to face will be definitely on system design architecture, whether you have capabilities to do system design architecture. Then technical leadership. I'll try to explain what that means and what the scope of those interviews. Give some examples. And then there's organizational leadership. How can you evolve, or how can you be a leader of an organization? And how do you take that organization forward? So that's a context for those interviews. And then there's definitely the people management aspects, and there'll be interviews related to people management. Now, these interviews may be called in different names by different organizations, but typically these are the four major areas where interviews will be done. There could also be sometimes an interview related to code comprehension, which is they will show you a piece of code and first try to understand that code and then tell what are the issues with that code, how will you improve that code, and so on. So this is more about whether you are kind of hands-on. Maybe you're not like high-speed coder right now because that's not expected of you, because you're taking a senior engineering leadership role, but you should still be able to look at code, comprehend it, and tell what is not good about that code and help out somebody with that. So that could be another area. I have not really covered that because in many cases in senior engineering leadership role, they may not have a code comprehension kind of interview. But if it is there, I'll definitely kind of glaze over it and try to explain what that means. Now let me get into the first set of interviews, which is to do with technical areas, which is related to technology. And the two main interviews which will be there in this particular dimension is one is the system design and architecture, and the other is the technical leadership. Now, in system design and architecture, what the interview is trying to understand is your capability to take a problem statement. You have capability to come up with some kind of a technical spec for that, or a requirement spec. Then you're able to come up with high-level design and dig deeper into that design, and also talk about aspects of non-functional attributes for the system that you're building, and so on. So I will definitely give more details on how I went about preparing for the system design and architecture kind of interview. But my focus is mostly going to be on full stack distributed systems because that's what my focus area was. But a lot of things which I'm talking about is also applicable for other domains, maybe data science or machine learning or probably IoT or mobile applications. So even there, some of these principles or some of these guidances or tips which I'm giving is relevant. So, and the other thing is technical leadership. Do you have skills in leading an engineering team? Are you aware of engineering processes, aspects of engineering productivity and so on? So we'll dig deeper into these aspects of what are typically being expected of this technical leadership kind of interviews. So let me now get into more details on system design and architecture interview and how I went about preparing. Now, as I told you, my focus right now is going to be on full stack distributed systems because that's what I prepared myself for. And why I'm also taking that as an example here is because a lot of opportunities in industry today is in this area, in distributed systems and full stack systems. So now the point is that when you're preparing for senior engineering leadership roles, one of the main things that you think about is you're not preparing anything from scratch. You're already having, for example, for me, I have more than 2 decades of experience in the industry. And most of you who are preparing for a senior engineering leadership role will have somewhat near 2 decades of engineering experience. So the main thing that you need to really do is look at the part of your career where you have been an engineering leader, where you have participated or you've owned and driven system architecture, system design, and so on. Bring back all those memories and structure that well. Now, for structuring that well, what I found is going through some of these books really helped me. Now, these are the 4 books which I really highly recommend. Whether you're preparing for interview or not, if you're in distributed systems, that you have to read. Now, the first one is a very, very popular book in the industry. Anybody who has worked in cloud systems might have gone through it, Designing Data-Intensive Applications. It's a very, very well-written book. The reason why I felt it is very good is because it covers a full spectrum of kinds of systems that you deal with in distributed systems and distributed computing. So it definitely covers the whole CAP theorem and the various dimensions of CAP theorem, the consistency, availability, partition tolerance. It discusses different kind of systems, caching systems, file systems, databases, network systems. How do you take and covers aspects of consistency, aspects of durability, aspects of the various aspects of transactionality and all that kind of stuff. It's a very, very good book, and it really takes examples from the industry and explains. So you are able to quickly relate to what you have seen in your career, and then you're understanding some of the internals, some of the protocols, some of the patterns, and why some of the things have been done the way they have been done. So it's a very good book. Then the next book which I felt was very useful was Site Reliability Engineering. This is written by a bunch of site reliability engineers in Google. It's again a pretty popular book in the industry. And as you know, Google has a lot of experience in deploying and maintaining highly reliable systems like the Google Search or YouTube. Any of these are the kind of systems which Google builds, are systems which are used by billions of users and has to be reliable. So there is a lot of good pointers on how they went ahead and designed these systems, how did they bring in aspects of redundancy so to take care of availability and reliability, then what are the various deployment strategies that they used, and what are some of the post-production things that they put in place. So a lot of these kind of things are discussed. It's a very good book. Again, I'm telling you, a lot of things that you go through will be something that you would have done in your career, but you can relate really well. Then building secure and reliable system is somewhat in the same area. It's about building, designing, implementing, and maintaining systems, considering security and reliability. Again, it's a pretty good book with a lot of good examples and concepts explained. Then the fourth one, which I've put, is a reasonably old book. It's called POSA. It's I think a 4 or 5 volume series, and it's called Pattern Oriented Software Architecture. It talks about various architectural patterns, and the volume 4 specifically focuses on distributed computing. Now, I can say some of the things which are discussed may be slightly outdated, but I felt still it was pretty useful to go through that. So these are the 4 good books which I felt was very useful. Then some other things which I did during preparation, one was definitely to go through Leet Code. Now, people may wonder why I'm talking about Leet Code. Leet Code is a pretty popular kind of portal where which can help you in preparing for coding interviews. But let me tell you, they do have articles and some amount of details on system design, right, and discusses that. So I found that was useful. The other thing is I kind of also spent a little bit time on coding, double quotes related topics, which is mostly related to data structures and algorithms. Now, even though you are not going to probably have coding interviews, it is very important that you have brushed up data structures and algorithms, because as you do system design, you will end up using some of these data structures. You may end up using caching, you may use hash tables, or you may have to use certain type of graphs or balanced trees like AVL trees, right? Or excuse me. So you may end up, or you may use trie, right? Or you may use suffix trees. So you may end up using some of these kind of things. And so it'll be good for you to kind of brush up data structures and algorithms and the whole greedy algorithm, divide and conquer, dynamic programming, and all these aspects is good to brush up, because we may end up using that during system design. So one of the things which I would recommend is, if you are a little rusty on data structures and algorithms, a very good course which you can go through is the data structures course from Princeton University, which is there in Coursera. It's a very good course, and you can quickly go over various videos and brush up the concepts in data structures and algorithms, which is something which I did just to quickly brush up on that. Then the other portal which I really recommend is the Algo Expert, SysExpert. Now, Leet Code and Algo Expert both are subscription-based portals, so you can decide to whether you want to spend money on it at all. But I did take subscription, and I did go through it, and I felt that the SysExpert part of Algo Expert was very useful, because this gentleman who's the founder of this particular portal, he has himself undergone many interviews with Amazon, Microsoft, Google, probably Facebook and stuff like that. So he has a good understanding of how these interviews are conducted, what are the expectations in these interviews, and I think he has sat on both sides. So he has participated in interviews, he has also taken interviews. So he has got a good understanding of both sides. So there are many video recordings where he has recorded mock interviews. So he takes a particular problem, and then there's another interviewer who's interviewing him, and then he takes you through how you kind of face that interview. So I went through many of those interviews, but many of those mocks, because that was very helpful for me to understand how I will structure my response. How will I go about asking the right questions in these interviews? How would I shape up the system architecture? So it was very useful for me, and I would say that if you have not been attending many interviews and you've been a little away from kind of facing interviews, see, it is not about the aspect of whether you can do that architecture. Definitely you can. But the only challenge is you have very limited time, and in that limited time you need to traverse or navigate through this whole problem pretty quickly, and that is where the preparation is required. If you are given probably a day, you will probably easily do it, right? But it's about having all those various points very fresh with you, and many of the things that you have done in past, you kind of have brought it back so that it's there in a structured fashion with you, so that you can quickly bring that experience into the interview. So that is where the preparation is required. Another thing which it's not specifically in interviews, but so these four books I kind of went through not to do with the interviews, right? I just went through because of my interest in distributed computing. Same thing with the highscalability.com. It's a reasonably old blog, and it actually has many blogs related to many systems, and what their internal architecture is, and why they took certain choices, what were some of the pros and cons, what were some of the challenges with these systems, and so on. So it's a pretty good blog, irrespective of whether you are attending an interview or not. It's a good one to keep reading. So so these are some of the preps which I did. Right now, I want to also explain what are the phases in your system design interview, right? And how do you kind of navigate through that interview? So usually, what will happen is they will give a high-level problem statement. So it probably, let us take an example, right? So they may say, design a ticket booking system. This is all what is there, right? Now, the point is, first phase is, how do you define the problem? How do you define the scope? How do you come up with functionality, right? Functional requirements, non-functional requirements. So for example, in this case, you may ask, okay, is this going to be the ticketing system is only going to be for movies, right? And will the ticket booking only happen in a specific region, or it can happen across the globe, right? So these are all some aspects of scoping where you're asking, then will you have to show the seat layout of the specific auditorium, and somebody will be able to use that layout to book the ticket. So these are all functional requirements. So you're kind of jotting down, okay, these are the requirements. So some things the interviewer may say, yeah, you should do it. Sometimes they say, no, it's okay. First phase, when we discuss, let's not bother about it. Then we can expand on it. So it helps you to scope the problem, right? Then there are non-functional aspects. What is availability expected? What is the response time expected, right? So which is the latency, which is ultimately related to performance, right? So all these kind of non-functional aspects you need to capture. Now, once you have the spec in place, maybe you'll have to define APIs, right? So probably because you may be building a cloud service, and you may require RPCs, and we need to define the interface definition, right? So for example, it may be book ticket, right? Cancel ticket. So these are all kind of APIs, and then you may also expect what are the inputs, what is the output, and all that kind of stuff. And once you define this API, that really crisply define the scope where in which you're working. So I think so this is the first initial phase where you're building, where you're coming up with the requirement specification. You may be defining the API and stuff like that, and then you get into the high-level design. So in the high-level design, you're talking about what are the components. Now, if you look at full stack, there may be client-side components, there may be cloud-side components, right? You need to think about the client-cloud service interaction, all these aspects. So you are talking, and within the cloud service, you may have multiple components, right? You may have edge services, you may have application services, there may be data store related stuff, right? There may be caching that may be using. You may use a distributed file system. You may have to use search indexing kind of things. You may have to end up using data pipelines. You may have to end up using pub subsystems. So you may have all these various components probably as a part of your architecture, right? So you'll have to clearly define what are the components, what are the component boundaries, and how these components will interact by taking use cases. Like, for example, book ticket is a use case. How will that use case realize? What are the various things happen? Which are the various components going to get involved? What is the end-to-end flow? Right? Now, one thing which you'd always remember is when you discuss the high-level design, never ever forget to talk about the non-functional aspects, because that is the key, right? What are you doing to take care of performance? What are you doing to take care of scalability? What are you going to do take care of aspects of consistency, right? What are the aspects? What are you going to take care of to make the system highly available? Maybe you're looking at 5 nines, maybe you're looking at 4 nines. Based on that, there are the design and architecture may drastically change, right? So the point is, how are you addressing the aspects of non-functional attributes which are expected in your system when you're designing, when you're architecting the system? That's something which you should definitely cover as you explain your architecture, because don't expect the interviewer to ask those questions. Being an engineering leader, it is expected that you will think through all these and answer. So never forget that. Then the next aspect is the aspect of distributed architecture, right? And do you need a distributed architecture? Will this be a cross-geo kind of a deployment, right? Then within a particular region, are you going to use different availability zones? How are you going to deploy various components? The database, the file systems, and you may have the various pods, right? And how are you taking care of that? So all these aspects needs to be looked at when you're looking at the distributed nature. Now, then data modeling, right? If you're using a data store, what is the data model? Are you going to use relational system? Are you going to use non-relational NoSQL? Or are you going to use a graph database, right? Then are you going to use caching? So all these kind of aspects. Then do you need to look at security? Do you need access control? Maybe role-based access control. Then how do you go about taking care of that? Do you need encryption? Like there could be encryption in the network, encryption in storage, right? What is going to be your data retention policy and all those kind of stuff? Then how are you going to deploy this? Are you going to have a phased deployment? Do you have a notion of user testing? Then what are the kind of environments you'll have? Like you have the dev, staging, probably pre-prod, prod. What are the kind of environments you're going to have? And while deployment, so what is your deployment model, right? That's another thing which you may have to think about. Monitoring, what kind of monitoring should you have? What kind of alerting should you have? So these are all various aspects. Sadly, this is very much related to distributed systems, because that's, as I told you, that's what I was preparing for. But you may have to think, if you are doing in a different domain like mobile application, maybe the set of things that you think about in design is different. But clearly think what is your approach to the design. I have to generically requirements, functional, non-functional requirements, high-level design with component definition, low-level design. Now, when I say low-level design, what I mean is, and that is where what I talked about data structures, algorithms, and all these kind of things, and internal systems is important, because the interviewer may decide to dig deeper into a particular component. Say you had a component where you had to use caching, right? So the interviewer may decide to dig deeper there. So, okay, fine. Now, how are you bringing fault tolerance in your cache? How the cache will interact with the backend data store, right? Then is it a read-only cache or it's a write-through cache, right? Then if it's a write-through cache, then how do you take care of partitioning and redundancy? So all these kind of questions can come. So if you have not understood how a scalable cache like Memcache or Redis or something works, it will be very difficult for you to handle these questions. Always you will be tested on detail, because the idea is to check whether you are able to move to any level of detailing in the design, right? So often you will be able to do that, because if you have gone through that experience in your career, then I'm sure you can easily do that. But that is where reading up some of these things, the internals, some of these systems, and just brushing up all that is very important. The other thing which I really did was self mocks. So what I used to do is every day evening, I will slot an hour. I'll take a problem and I will start facing it as if it's an interview. Myself, alone, right? So I'll say like ticket booking system one day. Next day it may be tiny URL. Third day it may be social network, right? Fourth day it may be search. Fifth day, so it's like that. So take different problems and start doing a self mock. If you're getting a friend who has got a lot of experience in interviewing, then probably he can help you to become like an interviewer, and then you can go to the interview. So that's also possible. If you have the luxury. I didn't have that luxury, so I did self mocks, but that really helped. You know what? How that helps is very obvious. It actually smoothens the way you communicate, right? Because, and one very important thing in all the interviews which I'm talking about is it's very important for you to communicate your thought process. Never sit for 3-4 minutes thinking about the system. So I've seen some of the people who are attending the interview say, hey, give me 4-5 minutes, let me think about it, right? The problem is 4-5 minutes, there's nothing going on. On the other side, what the person who's undergoing the interview is doing, the interviewer doesn't understand. And 5 minutes, there's nothing going on, and that should never happen. The interview should be always action-packed. So you should continuously be talking, what are you thinking through? Because that helps the interviewer to understand your thought process. How are you structuring the problem? So never forget to communicate your thought process. Now, the next thing which I would like to discuss about is technical leadership. Right? Now, technical leadership, what is very, very important is the aspect of how you are playing a role of an engineering leader. So it's more about, are you having awareness on engineering processes? Do you know what are the key aspects of engineering productivity, right? Then are you very clear on principles that needs to be followed, engineering principles to be followed while you spec a product, design a product, then while implementation, testing, deployment, there are very, very good engineering principles, right, which needs to be followed, and the processes that needs to be followed. Are you aware of that? The reason why that is important is because when you become an engineering leader, you will be one of the key participants in defining these processes for a team, and see that the team follows it. And you're able to explain why these processes are important. The other important aspect is, what are the metrics that you will have to consider, right? Quality metrics, efficiency metrics, productivity metrics. What are some of these things that you as an engineering manager will always be bothered about? And the other aspect is, what are the productivity tools probably that so definitely there's code repository, right? You have testing tools, and in that is unit testing, integration testing, performance, scalability testing, right? So all these aspects, and what are the kind of environments that you will have, right? So it's all about setting up the basic engineering processes and productivity tools, and also all the required metrics to measure the productivity of the engineering team, and so on. So that's what's covered. And these interviews usually will be completely around scenarios. Now let me tell you, give an example. So the example could be, okay, you're taking over a team and you found that the productivity is low because there are a lot of build breaks. Now, what are you going to do about it? Because if there are a lot of build breaks, your whole CI/CD is broken, right? So how are you going to handle that? Now, this again, I'm sure you in your experience, you may have come across this, or you may have come across systems which avoids this. So you can definitely talk. Always take examples. Never try to give hypothetical answers. If you're taking examples from your past, that becomes very credible, because then the interviewer understands, okay, you have gone through it, you understand the intricacies and subtleties of this problem, and you really have tackled it. Now, sometimes, and the way you answer these scenario-based questions is, you will have to explain, you will have to bring in the scenario, right? Then you will say, how did you assess the situation? So you have a situation, then you assess that situation, right? And then you came up with a solution for that situation, and that solution may be perfect or it may not be perfect, in which case you had some learnings, and then that learnings again it has a feedback loop into improving things. So this is the way you should explain. So you have a situation, you assess the situation, you came up with a solution for situation, and then you have some key learnings from that situation. So this is the way you can answer, because that brings in some phases to the way you explain and respond to the scenario which is put forth in front of you. So this is about technical leadership, right? And this book, Software Engineering at Google, is something which I had gone through, not for interview, but I had gone through before. And I found that this book is very useful, especially it's got nice principles related to coding and implementation. And then there is also this Google Tech Guide, which I went through, I discovered during my interview prep, where there is this system engineering principle related pages in that tech guide. Even that is good to just brush up some of the things and principles that probably you may have to think about. So that is about technical leadership. Now let us get into organizational leadership. Now there is a difference between organizational leadership and technical leadership, as you know. Technical leadership is mostly about how you give leadership for the engineering processes and engineering productivity. How do you give leadership towards all these aspects? Organizational leadership is your organizational skills in terms of setting up an organization, evolving an organization. Now, what does that mean? Are you able to come up with a structure for an organization? When you come up with a structure, you're thinking about what are the various roles required in that organization. Like you may need SWEs, you may need tech leads, you may need architects, you probably need product managers, program managers, maybe pre-sales people, security experts, quality experts. Maybe you need domain experts, right? So all these kind of roles, what are the kind of roles that you need? What are the responsibilities of these roles, and where do they fit into the organization structure, and what is the sizing, right? How many engineers do we need? SWEs, right? How many tech leads do you need? Then is this going to be cross geo organization? You probably have a team in India, maybe in US, maybe in UK. Then in which case the organizational dynamics is very different. And you need to also think what are the focus areas in each of these geos, how these geos are going to interact with each other, right? So all these aspects of the cross geo organization, and what are the challenges there. Then now you may have set up an organization. You need to also think about how that organization is going to evolve, and that is where the aspects of business goals, engineering goals come in. Of course, all the organizations have business goals. Now, you may be we may be playing a pivotal role in defining the business goals of your organization. And this business goals will be mapped to the business goals of your company. And so maybe you're bringing certain amount of revenues, or you're bringing certain number of customers, or you're bringing certain amount of savings. So you have very clear business goals which can be translated to dollar value. And that business goals translates to engineering goals, right? Maybe you're going to build products or enhance products. Maybe you have to spend time on refactoring some of your systems. Or you may have to bring in new functions. Say, for example, you didn't have business development, but you felt business development is required because of certain reasons, and for the expansion plan for your business you need business development. So these are some of the aspects and challenges that is important on the organizational evolution. Then how do you structure the organization, as I explained, right? So these are all aspects. So again, scenarios will be given. Say that you have to build you have to create a new organization for developing X product, which is intended for these regions in the world. How do you go about doing this, right? Sometimes they may also say that this is a budget constraint, or what are the various constraints which are there. So again, it's very difficult to answer it hypothetically. You will have to take take the aspects you learn from your career experience and bring that and respond to these kind of scenario questions. But again, the phases will be: you have a situation, you assess the situation, you came up with a solution, then you have learning. So that is the approach towards answering this, right? Because again, a scenario question. Take again examples from your past and try to explain. There may be some subtleties you might not have faced. That's okay. That you can add on or augment as you respond. But it should be based on some experiential learning that you had in your career rather than a hypothetical answer. The other important thing about organization leader is his self-awareness. How much self-aware he or she is. Does he or she know what are the strengths and how he or she is able to explain with data points why they are strengths? What are some of the development areas and why they think they are the development areas? And what is their plan towards, translating some of these development areas into their strengths in the course of time? So these are some of that's self-awareness, another very important aspect of an organizational leader. So definitely think through this also as you prepare for organizational leadership. Next important aspect is people management. Of course, if you're a leader, you will have to manage people, and there comes the aspects of what are your skills in team development, which is about mentoring, coaching, and what are your skills in terms of career development of various people in different roles in your organization. How do you manage conflicts? Conflicts could be within the team. It could be with your team and some stakeholder team. It could be with your team and a different organization in the same company, or it could be between your organization and the customer. And each of these have subtleties. You cannot use the same tactic or the same approach. Tactic is the wrong word. Same approach for handling these kind of conflicts. So think about all these different combinations of conflicts that you've faced, right from the aspects of two individuals having a conflict all the way to your organization having a conflict with the customer organization. So all these various scenarios you need to look at, and how did you approach? How did you do performance management? What are the metrics that you used? When there were lack of performance, how did you handle that? Another very important skill. How did you go about setting expectations and goals, and based on the capacity of the particular individual, how did you define the stretch goals and stuff like that, right? And maybe you faced pips, like somebody who's a low performer. How did you manage that? I'm sure you might have come across multiple instances like that, right? Then how did you manage stakeholders when you're having multiple projects running under you? How did you manage the stakeholders, and what was your participation in this whole stakeholder management? So people management is another interesting area where you may have a lot of experience, and I've just put the main bullet points or main areas which you may have to think through. So think about all the various experiences, challenges that you face in all these various dimensions in people management, and try to also think about examples and stuff like that which you had in your past career, and bring that into your fresh memory. And that is what it is. If you don't prepare for these interviews, it will be very difficult for you to bring in examples and explain the scenarios. So that is why preparation is important. So I think I covered all the major areas: system design and architecture, then technical leadership, organization leadership, and people management. So I hope this would have given you an overall idea, and you might have got some tips, I hope, from this video. Thank you so much for patiently listening. This is Vinod here, signing off. Bye-bye.